Hello everyone, welcome to S3 Basics, and this is going to be our agenda. I'll tell you about S3's object hierarchy, or the storage hierarchy, how S3 stores data. Then I'll tell you about the concepts of buckets and objects, and then we'll go deeper into bucket properties and object properties. So in bucket properties, I'll tell you things like versioning, encryption, server access logging, event notifications, transfer acceleration, requester pace. And in object properties, I'm going to tell you about storage class, multi-part upload, object operations, object logs, etc. All right, so what is the storage hierarchy? So in the S3 introduction, you have seen that S3 gives us an API and then it stores files as objects in the storage using the services. Now, when we store files or objects, how do you store that? Do you store in a directory or a file or a folder? How is it? So that's where storage hierarchy comes into picture, and it starts with something called buckets. So bucket is at the top level of S3's storage hierarchy. You can think of bucket as a hard drive that you are creating in S3 or a location that you are creating in S3. For example, if you have used Google Drive, bucket is similar to your own Google Drive. We have to create a bucket, and all the objects that we want to store would be stored in this particular bucket. Now, when do we create bucket? There can be various scenarios. For different line of businesses, we can create different buckets, or within the same line of business, let's say you have sub components, we can create different buckets for those. So it completely depends on your organization's need, how you want to store and separate data. So it is like storing in different folders, right? So you might be having a folder for HR, you might be having a folder for finance, you might be having a folder for IT. Similarly, here you might be having a folder for HR, or a bucket for HR, a bucket for IT, a bucket for finance, so on and so forth. Now inside of bucket, we upload objects like CSV, Parquet files, Avro, JSON, image files like JPEG, PNG, and video files like MP4, documents like DocX, Windows documents or PDFs, etc. So basically we upload objects here. Not only that, we can create folders also in the inside of a bucket. For example, inside of this bucket, let's say I create a folder, and then I can store objects inside of the folders also. So instead of storing objects directly in the bucket, we create folders and store objects inside of that folders. Again, why do you create folders? Because maybe you want to organize your files in a certain way. You want to organize your objects in a certain way, so that let's say you have a single bucket for one department, and that particular department has sub departments or different, catering to different business lines. So you might be creating different folders for different business lines. You can create folders, and then inside of the folder also you can create folder. So it's a subfolder or a subdirectory, and then you can store objects inside of this folder, or you can store objects directly inside of the first level folder. So in this case, I'm creating level 1 folder and then level 2 folder. I'm putting objects or keeping objects in the level 1 folder also and level 2 folder also. And in this case, I have just created a level 1 folder and I'm creating objects inside of this folder, or storing objects inside of this folder. If I wanted, I could create a folder inside of this folder also. Now, let's say for this particular training, I create a bucket called 3IAM S3 bucket. Now, how do you access these buckets, folders, objects, etc.? So S3 gives us two ways to access. One is URI and the other one is URL. So let's see the difference. So let's say I want to access this bucket, 3IAM S3 bucket. So the URI would be S3 :/ followed by 3IAM -S3 bucket and then ending with a /. The URL would be in HTTP format, which is HTTPS 3IAM S3 bucket dot the region code dot amazonaws.com. So this is a nicer way of writing it. So let's say if we create the bucket in US East North Virginia, then it will be HTTPS : 3iam-s3-bucket dot s3 dot us1 dot amazonaws.com. In data engineering, we use the URI format, so I'll not focus too much on the URL format. So URL format can be used for front-end applications and media content. Like let's say you have a video and you stored the video in a particular bucket and you want to put the location of the bucket in your code. So in that case, you can use this URL format. But in case of data engineering, whatever services we use, Athena, Redshift, EMR, Glue, etc., will be using the URI format. So I'll be giving focus to the URI format only. Okay, let's take some examples. Let's see how the objects and folders are also denoted using URIs. So let's say we are storing these two objects, orders.csv and aws.png, directly inside of this bucket, which is 3IAM S3 bucket. So how the URI would look like for these two orders. First, how the URI would look like for the bucket. You already know that it is S3 colon // followed by the name of the bucket, and then we end it with the / also. Now we have these two objects, orders.csv and aws.png, inside of the bucket directly. So that's why this is how CSV would look like, and this is how aws.png object would look like. So this is how we would identify these two files, orders.csv and then aws.png. We'll have to mention the bucket name and then the object name. So S3 colon / bucket name / object name. So this is the URI format. Now let's see how it would look like in the case of folders. So this is the folder, which is a retail folder. The URI of the folder would be, again, because it is under 3IAM S3 bucket, so this is how we address a bucket and then the name of the folder, retail /. And let's say we have these customers.json and sellers.avro inside of the retail folder, right? So we have already denoted the retail folder. Now customers.avro is again insert retail folder. So we'll have after retail, we'll have customers.json. Similarly for sellers.avro, the bucket name, then the folder name, followed by the name of the object, because sellers.avro is in the object or is in the folder retail. And this is the way this particular object or this particular file, sellers.avro, would be denoted or addressed. Now let's go one more level deep. So I have this images folder. Inside of this images folder, I have iphone.png and samsung.jpg. So how the URI would come out to be? Of course, we'll have the bucket followed by the retail folder followed by the images folder. Why retail and images? Because inside of the bucket I have this retail folder, and inside of this retail folder I have images folder. I do not have objects directly. iPhone and Samsung are in images folder. So I'll have to mention the retail folder followed by the images folder and then iphones.png. And in case of Samsung, it will be again bucket name, retail folder, images folder followed by samsung.jpg. So as you can see, this is how we actually denote individual objects. Orders.csv, aws.png, customers.json, sellers.avro, iphones.png and samsung.jpg, all these are 6 different objects. These are the objects and we are bothered about these objects only. We are not bothered about the folders or the files. At the end of the day, we have to access the objects, not the folders. So these things are called object keys. This notation of URI is called object key. Again, URL also would be called as object keys, but I'm showing you using URI. So this entire thing is an object key. This is also an object key. This is third object key, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So all these 6 objects are denoted using these 6 keys. And remember, the object key has to be unique across AWS, across all the regions, and across all the accounts. So if let's say there is one more bucket named 3IAM S3 bucket, if you create that, then I'll not be able to create it. So let's say if you, while creating the 3IAM S3 bucket, you get an error saying that this bucket already exists, it means that someone else has created a bucket with the same name. Maybe in a different account, in a different region, does not matter. It has to be unique globally. So because the bucket name has to be unique globally, the object names would also be unique globally. Now the question is, how do you upload and store objects? So we can use AWS console or AWS command line interface. Let's say we are using both console and AWS CLI. Eventually what you do, it send the request to S3 API to upload or store objects and to read objects also. So if you're using console, then maybe I'll be having file in my local machine. I will use the console to upload the file in the console, and the console would call an S3 API, which would actually store the data in the S3 storage. Similarly, if I use AWS CLI, let's say I use it in an EC2 instance, and I have the file in an EC2 instance, and the file can be in local machine also. So I can use AWS CLI in my local machine as well. And then the request or the upload request would be sent to S3 API, and then it would be stored in the S3 storage using different object names.